Lover's Moon, a novel by Mark Leslie and Julie Strauss. Read by the authors. Author's Notes. Hello, this is Mark Leslie. If you're a long-time listener of the Canadian Werewolf Series, then you know I end each of the books with a bit of an author's note where I share some of the behind-the-scenes writing elements. Several readers had indicated their interest in seeing the details of the backstory of how Michael and Gail first met, which is only mentioned in a few brief flashbacks. I realized if I wrote it, the story would be an actual romance. Unlike Fear and Longing in Los Angeles, which contains many romance elements, this one would be an all-out actual romance novel. I did try, but realized I couldn't do that on my own. So, I enlisted the help of a good friend, Julie Strauss. Since Lover's Moon was a co-authored title, either me writing a solo author's note or trying to merge notes from Julie and I together might have shortchanged what was great about the collaborative process. And so, for these auditory audio notes, we decided to jump into a virtual video chat and discuss a little bit about our experiences writing the novel. What follows is a slightly edited and cleaned up version of that recording. Hey, Julie, thank you so much for agreeing to do the author notes in collaboration with me.
Thank you for having me, Mark. I'm very excited to talk to you.
So as we record this, we are in the process of the very, very final tweaks and edits. The book is just about 15 days from release. And you and I have never collaborated on a book before. I need to ask you a question. When I reached out I was going to say quiet desperation, but it wasn't quiet at all. It was chaotic desperation. And said, Julie, would you consider joining me on this voyage? What were your first thoughts?
Oh, God, don't ruin it, Julie.
Why would you say that?
Well, okay, there's actually a funny backstory to this, which is my family. I'm not the only one of my family who knows and loves you. My entire family knows and loves you. My son just adores you, considers you more his friend than my friend.
I've seen him more in the last few years.
I know, exactly. So everyone in my family has known, because I've said many times, like, I hope someday I can write with Mark. That would be really fun. And I've mentioned it many times. And then this came up, and I mentioned it one night at dinner, and my husband's first reaction was, do not mess this friendship up.
Oh, Joe, that's awesome.
I know. And then I told my son about it, and he went, okay, but don't mess it up. Don't lose him as a friend.
Well, we had talked about doing a nonfiction book potentially, right?
Right.
Which we still have in the back burner. We're not going to mention.
I hope so. Like, I hope this experience hasn't destroyed that option.
That's true, yeah.
But I thought it was very funny that my family assumed that I would be the one to screw everything up.
Don't they know me?
They know your good side. That's it.
Yeah, they haven't seen the other side.
But I mean, it was funny because it was my fear too, for the main reason that you and I are such good friends, and we have very, very different work styles. And this was one of the first things we talked about was, how are we going to do this so that we don't kill each other?
Yeah.
And I told you right off the bat, this friendship is more important to me than any book ever in the history of the world. So it was just really, really important to me that the friendship always came before the book.
Right.
Always. And that if we could set up those boundaries to keep our relationship secure, then I knew the book would be really fun. And it was. But my fear was more for hurting a relationship. And then the secondary fear was not writing well enough for your series.
Oh, that never crossed my mind, that aspect. My thought was maybe I would let you down because we have different styles. We have different approaches. And how did you handle dealing with the chaos that is the way I write.
Well, I didn't think it was chaos because we were able to keep a pretty tight leash on everything. I think it came down to that first conversation where I had to be totally honest with you and tell you the truth, which is I will not do last minute. It makes me panic. It the anxiety just makes me crazy. And I told you right off the bat, I won't work on the day before. I won't do last minute changes. I will tap out. And that's when you'll get really angry at me.
Right.
So I just had to tell you what my limits were. And it was a hard one because I've worked with you. I've edited with you before and you're really really good at last minute. You I think really thrive at that adrenaline of let's see what happens in this last hour. And it's something I admire about you and I wish I had more of, but I also know my limitations. So I guess the answer is setting up the fences in advance and telling you I will be terrible at this. And if you're going to need to work like that, you need to find another co-author and no harm done.
And I thought that was fascinating because you sent a schedule. You had a whole month, and you're like, okay, here's how we're going to do this the entire month of March. And you had it all mapped out. You did my break times, when I was going to the bathroom, when I was going to sleep, all the things. No, I'm just kidding. But you had it very organized and very structured, and you sent it to me, probably expecting me to tear it up and go, no, we don't need a plan.
I 100% did. Let's just go with the flow, Julie. Let's just see what happens.
One of the things you didn't realize, or maybe you did realize subconsciously, is I need that. I need that structure. I don't create that structure myself, but I desperately need it. So I needed you to do this book, not just for the structure, but also because I've been wanting to write this book for about a year and a half, and I've tried, and I can't. I could not get into Gail's head. And I've loved your writing so much. I've loved the way you get into characters' heads. And it's like, I know someone, I know I know somebody who can pull this off. And I know somebody who writes with a humor that I just so admire as well. And I think back to and I have to say this for readers of the series, going back to Fear and Longing in Los Angeles. And I purposely, the reason I put Tabitha Hamilton from your book Prosecco Heart in Fear and Longing in Los Angeles is I love that character so much. And I love the scene you created. I had to like do a little Easter egg tip of the hat. And it was kind of like, oh, I have a bit of Julie's coolness in my book.
Which had Mark and Liz in it.
Yeah, which had fictional Mark and Liz in that as well, which was just this weird sort of multiverse of madness.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
But no, I honestly could not have done this book without you. It never would have happened. And I discovered so much more about, not just about Gail and her backstory, her brother, her best friend. I had no idea these people existed. No idea at all. I did have some sort of family stuff, that appeared in Stowaway, some historic stuff that I didn't get into because I wanted to leave it a little open-ended. But I had no idea. And then I discovered something cool about Michael too, that we kind of talked through. And I don't want to give away spoilers, but let's talk about your approach to Gail.
I was excited and nervous about Gail, and the nerve came from, again, our friendship. And I know how you feel about Gail, and I know she's kind of this idealized woman, and I know she's based on your partner Liz, who we both adore and worship. And when I said to you, she needs to have flaws, I need to mess her up a little bit, I need to make her, and I was really nervous to tell you that because I thought you were going to say absolutely not, she is the perfect woman.
Yeah. My ma's never been naked in her life, as Cliff Clavin used to say.
Yes. And so I was nervous that you were going to expect me to write this sort of idealized character, this flawless character, which is totally uninteresting to me. I like cracked, messy people,
right,
who screw things up and then try their best to make it right. And so when I started saying to you, we're going to give her some flaws, I need to make her something. So what we landed on ultimately was she's too competitive. She's very stubborn. She thinks she's right all the time. And to give her these things and give her consequences for this characterization of her. And I started thinking, you're going to stop liking. It would be terrible if you stopped liking Gail. It would be terrible if your readers stop liking Gail, because I've introduced flaws. I've made her a slightly more difficult personality. But I just knew that if we didn't add some layers to her, I would get bored. And
Right.
then the writing would get boring.
Yeah.
And, we don't have time for boring. People
Yeah.
are interesting. And luckily for me, you were really, really open to not all of the ideas I had.
Well, I did have my limits.
You did have some limits, which I need.
Giving her a second head or a third eye. No, we weren't going to do that.
Yes. Yes.
But
You stopped me when I got a little crazy, but I was really, really grateful that you were open to me wanting to just make her a flawed human. To me,
right.
that is just really interesting. And that was how I wanted to approach it. And I was just really incredibly grateful that you were open to that.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I was very nervous about handing over a character I had put up on a pedestal. The way Michael puts Scale up on a pedestal. I wonder where he got that from. But I think one of the things that was really interesting is I fell way deeper in love with Gail after you created her with flaws, because she was now more concrete. She was more three-dimensional. She was somebody that I could see sitting across the coffee shop table from, joking and arguing with at the same time. I could see someone like being madly in love with her, but also infuriating. Like all of
Yeah.
those things, which is real. Like that's what relationships are. So I love that, and then I love the fact that we spent a lot of time talking about the universe, because you didn't know. I only had it in my head. Okay, so this universe, how many creatures are there? Are there other, like, yeah, there was another wolf in one of the novels. Yeah, there was this. Yeah, there was that. But what is this world like? And we had a lot of discussions that I think really helped me understand where this series could potentially go.
That was something that really impressed me about you and your approach to this work, because this is your universe and you've created these books. What, this is the fifth, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've created this entire world. You've got these characters you love. You've got this idea of where it might all go and how it all began. And it just really impressed me that you were so open and you just said, let's just see where this goes. Let's see where the ideas take us. And I would have expected, I've never collaborated before on a writing project, but I would have expected that when you go into someone else's fictional universe that is already well established and already has fans, I would have thought that I was going to come in and you were going to say, Gail is XYZ, and this plot is going to go 1, 2, 3, and there's no bending. And you were the opposite. You were totally willing to say, what do you think should happen here? And I've always been really curious about how you have such a loose approach to something that you've already created. Like how do you have so much trust in you to hand over characters that you love so much?
Well, I only have trust in people I trust and believe in, right? So that you know goes without saying that I'm not just going to hand this over to anyone.
Yeah.
It has to be somebody who I've watched at work, who I know well, who I understand is going to take the care, but could also be playful and have fun with it too. So that was an important element. The other thing too is, I mean, this whole series came from an idea of a guy waking up naked, in a park and wondering what he did the night before. And it was meant to be a short story. And so everything has slowly evolved and grown. in a procrastinator's way. I mean, the first book took 10 years to happen. So
Mhm.
it's, I mean, it's been with me for a long time, and most of it's never been written down. I think, our editor has created some stuff, and I know you've created some stuff for me as well as an editor that have helped me. But I don't really have a proper map of the universe. It's all just
Mhm.
floating around in my head, which means it's loose. And that kind of leads me to thinking about something that we bumped into. So we had to base this story, this backstory, on when Gail and Michael first met, knowing that it's a romance and they end up together, but knowing that a few months later he screws it up again, and they part ways. But of course, I think we will introduce an element that is hinted at in this book as to why that may have been inevitable. So that's fine. That's just part of the larger universe that we haven't explored. There's so many unanswered questions. I love unanswered questions because it gives me something fun to discover.
Mhm.
But I think when I've lost track of where I was with that, of course, which often happens when you just kind of let your stream of consciousness go. But I think the question I was going to ask was gone, is completely gone
Okay,
from
we'll
my
cut
head
it.
now. We can cut that part out.
We'll cut that part out.
I lost it again. I had it for just, it was just right. It was right. It's just right there. Right. Like Michael's flashing memories of when he's a wolf.
It'll come back at 2 in the morning.
It will, damn it. Natural segue into, oh, I know what it was. So a lot of what we wrote was based on that flashback. Therefore, a lot of it was based on text from the very first book, which we originally conceived of in 2006,
Mhm.
many, many eons ago, where I might have toyed with that in 2014 when I was actually getting the serious writing done and like rewriting the drafts after working with an editor. But the flashback to Gail and how they met, we were limited because Michael already kind of outlines over a couple of pages. Oh, I met Gail back in whatever, and this is where we did this, and we went on these dates, and we did this. But we had fun playing with that, didn't we?
Yes, that was very fun because then we could do that thing that all couples do, which is, "That's not what I was wearing. That was not what we had to drink."
Yes.
And I love doing that. I thought that was so much fun.
Yeah. So diehard readers might go, wait a second. Michael said she was wearing this, and Michael said they did that on the third date. It was like, no, that happened 2 months later.
Right.
It's the way he remembered things wrong, which I
Right.
think is important because most of the series is told from his point of view. Actually, the entirety of the series, except for this novel, which is half and half, Gail's point of
Mhm.
view, his point of view, you've never seen outside of Michael's point of view. So you're realizing potentially for the first time, Michael, we're reading his interpretation of things. We're not reading reality. That was a
Right.
good reminder for me, anyways, as the author. Like, yeah, Michael's not the god. This is just his perspective, which is flawed.
And as is hers, which I think would be really fun for your longtime readers to go, "Oh, well, she remembers it this way, so the truth must be somewhere in the middle
Right.
of
Yeah.
that," which opens it up to a lot of things for your readers to be able to think it through as a couple experience.
Right. Yeah. And I think one of the things I loved about this process was I'm a discovery writer. I kind of know where the end, well, we know the end. They got to be together at the end. So I kind of knew, I've known the end of most of the books that I've written, roughly. I kind of give or take a little bit. In this particular case, we had a Google spreadsheet and we went through like the romancing the beat
Yes.
structure by structure. You pounded it out really brilliantly, and yet within that structure we had so much fun because the way we wrote it was, you would write a chapter, give it to me, then I would write a chapter, give it back to you. So we had like 2 days in between the writing, where we were writing. And honestly, like opening up my email box in the morning knowing that I was going to have the next chapter that you wrote was just like Christmas every day
Yeah.
for me. It was like, oh boy, what did you do? Oh yay.
For me too, because I knew what each chapter was going to get to, but I never knew how you were going to get there.
Right. Yeah.
It was so much fun. exactly like you said. It was like opening a present. Like, okay, what do we have to work with today?
And yet something we both had to stop ourselves from doing, because we were doing it up until almost 3/4 of the way through. All right, here's the chapter. I don't think it's that good.
Yes.
I hope you don't hate me. I'll rewrite it if you don't like it.
Yes.
And pretty much every single time the other person said, "What the heck are you talking about? This is
It's
literally."
brilliant. Yes. I know. And we both did it. Oh my God, this is terrible. I'll rewrite it. And it was always so, and then the other person would always go, this is so good.
I was just going to say, and we changed some things, right? Like we had the thing that happened in Gail's shop. We talked about it and we kind of threw it in, and the
Yeah.
first one didn't work, so you went back and redid it. And oh my God, did you ever take it to the next level with the bees? Like
Yeah.
that
That
was
was
just
fun.
that was hilarious.
That was very fun. My favorite chapter to write came out of a personal conversation we had because I was doing what it said in our beats was it was the first time they slept together. And so I was writing that scene and I started thinking, I wonder what kind of music Michael would have playing. So I think I shot you a text.
Yeah.
And you and I have a long history of teasing each other, me teasing you for loving Rush.
Yes.
And so I thought, oh, for sure he's going to tell me it's Rush. Um, and so then we kind of got into this playful conversation about, oh my God, that is a terrible sex song. And you were saying this, and I was saying, and you were saying mine were terrible, and I was saying yours were terrible. And it was a very funny conversation. And it wrote itself into that chapter. And that chapter makes me laugh so much because it
It
was
does.
a funny conversation we had anyway.
It's funny, you captured the heart of that conversation in such a brilliant way. I have to say, I remember the first time I met your husband, Joe,
Mhm.
and I remember feeling like for a moment there, Joe and I just started going into Rush together, and it's like Julie wasn't even there. It's just the two of us
Yeah,
just nerded out. And I'm like, whoops, okay, sorry, I should.
it's okay. I'm
I'm just
used
so
to it
happy to
when
find a kindred spirit in him.
right, you Rush fanboys, I just sat there and ate my nachos. I was fine.
And we talked. It's like, oh, Julie, but there's one Rush song you might like because it's a ballad and it talks about love a little bit, which was
Yeah.
rare. And yeah, but that was a really really fun scene. There's so many scenes. I think one of the things I loved was the scene. So in the original novel, Michael talks about walking in and seeing Gail for the first time, and he's just like, oh, awestruck, like the Holy Grail is in front of him, that kind of thing. And what Gail was actually doing on the phone and like texting is and all that stuff was just a riot to read. Knowing Michael's like, oh my God, this is a goddess. She's amazing, uh, and that just blew my mind. I thought that was fun.
That was a lot of fun to write because I like cracked people and I like thinking that she's having this absolutely chaotic day. And you do never know when you're making an impression on
Yeah,
someone. So it was fun to get into her head and to know because I have read the Canadian Werewolf books, I know what he was thinking on that day. So it was really fun to make the inside of her head a more chaotic space. And, how boring would it be if she just walked in and went, every man in this room is in love with me because I'm perfect. I mean,
yeah,
that's not an interesting book.
no,
Whereas if she's going, my life is a disaster right now, my business is falling apart. Wow, this writer is hot, but I cannot go near him.
yeah, celibate
So
year.
keep it together, Gail. Right? Silly her. She
Yeah,
had no idea what we were going to do to her.
no, I know the poor woman. We just walked her right into that trap, which kind of leads to the next sort of thought about. Wow, you'd think I was stoned. Um,
Sorry.
no, it's
Contact high.
okay. It's okay. It was related. It was related to that, and I can't. Oh, oh, oh! I lost it again.
Hmm.
Gail meeting Michael, and the back and forth and the jokes.
Well, let me ask you one. You've collaborated a lot with a lot of different writers. This is your first time collaborating for fiction?
First time collaborating for a fiction novel. I've done short stories before, but not a
Oh.
novel. Yeah.
So what do you think what are your recommendations to people? You have a lot more experience with it than I do. What are
Wow.
your recommendations to people who want to collaborate to make it a successful experience?
Great question. I honestly still think that the top priority is having that discussion and making sure this is someone that you trust. Not just someone that you trust because you know they're talented and you know they can do it and whatever, or you personally trust them, but somebody that you're willing to look like an idiot in front of and you're not worried that they're going to judge you. That kind of trust, I think, is important, especially in fiction. In nonfiction, it's a little bit different because you're more removed from the writing. Whereas I find when I write fiction, I'm in the writing and I'm just really deep into it. When it's nonfiction, I'm a couple steps above it, looking down at it. So I'm not as precious about it. But when it's
Yes.
fiction, you can get precious, and I think that's that's something I highly recommend. And then of course I think the styles have to align. Now, I honestly, when I look at your scenes compared to my scenes, and this is, we all have that imposter syndrome that we still struggle with, but I think your scenes are way funnier and a lot more fun than my scenes. When I read them, I'm like, damn, I want to be as good a writer as Julie one day. So
Oh
that, I think,
gosh.
if you can write with someone for whom you admire what they can do and their talent, you look forward to, like, I'll become a better writer if I keep working with her. That kind of thing.
And I had the exact same experience. Every time you told me this doesn't work or this needs, we need to change this, because we already had that trust that already existed in our friendship, it was never it was never a situation where I went, "Ugh, he doesn't know how to write. He doesn't know." It never felt personal. It never felt negative at all. Every single correction and constructive criticism that you gave me, I had that same feeling of, "He just made me better at this,"
Yeah.
which is such an exciting feeling to be working with someone who you think is better than you. I love that feeling because
Yeah.
everything we did, I felt like he's making me better at what I do, which is great.
Yeah, because you want to surround yourself with people that you have to measure up to. And I think
Yes.
that's a great place to be as a writer, because you're like, okay, I need to work hard at this. I'm not going in half-assed. I need to give this my all because I don't want to let this person down.
Yeah.
Right? I think that's a
Right.
great way to approach it, right?
And I also thought, tell me what you think of this. Uh, I I've sort of been noodling on this a lot, is that both of our weaknesses really in writing really complemented each other,
Yeah,
in that I really tend to underwrite. I really tend to assume that the reader knows everything that's going on in my head,
right.
and I tend to leave out details, and you occasionally will underline points over and over, and over explain them, and I thought it was so cool the way we would send these chapters back and I would say, "Nope, you already said that in the beginning," or,
Yeah,
I would say that to you, and then you said to me over and over, "I don't know what you're talking about. This You've never mentioned this before." Um, and so it was just cool that we were able to catch the valleys in each other's writing
yeah,
and to sort of meet them in the middle. I loved it. I just thought it was so invigorating to be able, it was like you could shine a mirror into my own head and I could go, "I don't explain those things. I didn't
right,
even mention her brother, and now all of a sudden she's talking to her brother." And
right.
and you were always able to catch those things because you do the opposite in your writing. And I just thought that was the coolest part of collaborating, was when our strengths and our weaknesses really meshed.
Yeah. Well, not just in the craft. With things we did in the craft, our habits kind of helped each other out. So they kind of either offset each other, or we blended them and we found a happy medium.
Yeah.
But also in our approach, they complemented each other, right? Because you wanted and needed structure, and I thrived in anarchy, and so we kind of needed each other for that to make it work. And similarly, so I think it was
Yeah.
complementary craft wise, but also complementary process or logistical wise.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think it worked really well.
Yeah. And so this was a really unique experience. I have collaborated before, but I have never done it in such a way. And I know when Joanna Penn and I wrote the Relaxed Author, that was a unique experience because we wrote the book the way we're speaking now, and that was a unique experience. But I've never written a novel like this where we basically wrote the whole thing in a month, the two of
Hmm.
us, which meant it was only about 30,000 words each, so it wasn't as much as demanding as NaNoWriMo, but we had to also trust and rely on each other through the whole process, and we were both going through things, so it's not like it was like we still managed to make it work, and it was kind of like, wow, I still can't believe we pulled this off.
Yeah, and I think that the fact that we both went through personal catastrophes, this book will always be a very, very bright light, and even now, we're both just barely out of it, and every time I look at it, it makes me laugh because I remember being in a hospital and reading what you sent me
Right.
and
Yeah.
laughing and getting excited, like, I get to look forward to this, and it's always gonna have a very special place in my heart because I know that every time I look at this book for the rest of my life, I'm gonna remember what a difficult time in my family's life it was, but also that I had this bright light every day, which honestly got me through it.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. I mean, I've always thought that writing has always been therapy for me in many ways. I always
Mhm.
joke to say, well, I write about scary things because I believe there's a monster under my bed, and it's really just therapy. But this was very much needed I mean, and needed in other ways, because this book also represents a bit of a turning point in the series. I have the first four books where there's like sort of a larger story arc, and then this kind of is an in-between piece before we get into the next bit. Well, we'll see where that goes, because who knows what that's
'Cause you
going to
don't have
be.
a plan.
I don't have a plan. I'll figure it out. I'll burn that bridge while I'm standing on it.
But Mark, do you think if we weren't collaborating, do you think you would have finished the book?
I never would have finished this book if we had not. No, no, I never would have finished this book.
No, I wouldn't have
Um,
either. There was too much going
yeah,
on, and if I was not accountable to you, I would have gone, "Forget it. I'll do
yeah.
this book next year."
But like you said, it was a bright light. It was something I looked forward to. I treated myself with getting to read what you had written the day
Mhm.
before, and then I was like, oh, and then that would inspire me to want to write something. And there were a few times where I was like very last minute going, well, she's 3 hours behind me, therefore the end of my day is sooner than hers, so I can get
That's
it to
right.
her later. I had to pull that a couple times, but it was a really fascinating process. I mean, I got to the point where I think I reached out and said, so what do you think about the next book? You want to give this another shot? At which point I think you went, horror, huh? Werewolves, right? This was romance. This is not urban fantasy.
No way. I'm all in. This was a blast.
But thank you for stepping up and taking a chance, because this was a really good time, and I really appreciate having you as a partner for this amazing project. And of course, we dedicated the book to our partners on our crazy life journeys.
Our long-suffering partners.
Yes, exactly.
God
Oh,
bless them.
yeah.
Mark, I wanna thank you because, for a writer as esteemed as you are, to trust me with your work is just beyond what I could have dreamt of, and I'm really proud of us for, keeping our friendship
Yeah.
at the forefront at all times because,
Yeah.
we share the same values in terms of relationships, and it just means the world to me that we kept our friendship so tight and discussed a lot of things that we had never discussed before. There was at one point where I sent you that note and went, "Oh, okay, our friendship's on a new level, right?"
We're talking about some strange things here, yeah. But I think that was really great, because I think we already had a really solid foundation for a friendship, but working on this project solidified it in many ways. I mean,
Yeah.
it was also a fun excuse because we did a lot of chats along the way. So it was just a good excuse, like, hey, I get to talk to Julie again. That's cool.
Yeah. This time we actually had a reason instead of just, "You wanna meet for a Zoom beer?"
Yeah,
Just for
yeah,
the hell of it?
exactly.
Now I guess we're back to that.
Yeah, I guess so. But thank you for joining me on this journey, and thanks for giving Gail a life I never imagined could be possible for her.
Well, thank you for trusting me with her. I adore Gail. And I adore you, and I adore Liz for letting us be nuts like this.
Oh, thanks again, Julie.
My pleasure, Mark.
You've been listening to Lover's Moon, a paranormal romantic comedy by Mark Leslie and Julie Strauss. Read by the authors. Lover's Moon is book 5 in the Canadian Werewolf Series, published by Stark Publishing and available in print, ebook, and audiobook. The music used in this production, Waltz Primordial by Kevin MacLeod featuring Alexander Nakarada, was licensed via Incomptech.com and is copyrighted by Kevin MacLeod.